Listeners, are you ready for your monthly literary adventure? We now have the BFF Book Club. Join us each month to explore a new book. After reading, connect with fellow book lovers and meet the author in a live interview. Can't make it live? Don't worry. We'll send you the recording. You can find all the upcoming book club selections at www.bookishflights.com/read/BFF book club. Hi, I'm Cara Infante, and this is Bookish Flights. In each episode, I chat with one bookish guest as we take some time to sample and savor the pairing recommendations from their bookish flight. We hope to give you suggestions to cultivate your TBR list and nurture your leisure time through books. In today's episode, we have our second BFF book club meeting with Hazel Pryor. Hazel is the author of Ellie and the Heartmaker and Richard and Judy's book club #1 bestseller, How the Penguins Saved Veronica, which we will be talking about today. Her third book in the series, Gone with the Penguins, will be out this Thursday, November 7th. As well as writing, Hazel is a freelance harpist. She lives on Exmoor in England with her husband and a huge ginger cat. Welcome to the club, Hazel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I am so excited to have you, my friend Jackie, that is here today. We talked about your book way back on episode 19 and 20. We talked so long, we had to make it a two-part episode, but it was on books that make you feel good, and she introduced me to you, so I'm so honored to have you on the show today.
I am so delighted to be here, and that's really, really good to know because, How the Penguins Saved Veronica is very, very special to me. All my books are special to me, but it's really, really, really good to know that you've enjoyed that one particularly.
Yes, well, I also feel like you are so much more than this bio. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are?
Oh gosh, I never expected to become a writer for starters. I only became my first book was published in 2019, so it's not that long ago. I did loads and loads of different jobs before I got to that stage. I lived in Italy for a while and taught English to foreign students there, taught English to Italians. That was a great laugh. And I came back then to the UK and I worked in various different jobs, including the National Trust. I did a bit more teaching. I tried to do some music, didn't get very far with it. And then I got ill for many, many years and couldn't do anything at all, which happened just after I got married, which was not good for my husband, really, because he had to
Wow.
basically look after me. But then I had pretty much life-saving surgery. They finally discovered what was wrong with me. And I kind of suddenly thought, oh my gosh, I can do things again. I've got my life back. What are the things that I really want to do with this new shiny life I've got for myself? And the two things that I really loved were the creative things. So it was writing and music. So I blew all the dust and spiders off my little Celtic harp and started to play that again. Started slowly to get good at that. I'm self-taught, so it was kind of quite a long
Wow.
journey, but I started to get good at that again. And then I started to write short stories, and that kind of led into the whole novel writing thing. And I never expected to get published, but it happened, and here I am.
Wow. Wow, I always love hearing these backstories, especially when you say like I didn't expect to be a writer, but here I am. But I imagine that, having like you said, feeling your illness and what you went through with your health, like that was a big, scare of your life, and it's this big pivotal point of like, well, wait, am I really spending my time doing what I want to be doing?
So yes, I think that was the crux, really, that being ill for so many years, that really made me think I had wasted a lot of my life or frittered it away or tried a bit of this and a bit of that. And it was a sobering thought that, and I'd had those 5 years without being able to do anything because I was in so much pain.
Wow.
Um, and I thought, wow, it is every moment is so precious. Life is such a gift. It's really important to do what you want to do. And often society pushes you into doing what you don't want to do, and you just accept that. But I thought, actually, I have opportunities again. I'm going to try and push it and try and just do those things, find a way of doing those things. My husband had been supporting me for a long time, bless him, emotionally and, financially. Um, and he was prepared to do that for a while longer, whilst I experimented with the writing and the music and tried to get out there with it. And it did work for me. I was lucky.
Yeah. That's actually one of the quotes that got sent in to me was that from, and this is from How the Penguins Saved Veronica, but life can be generous. It can heal the heart and whisper that it is always possible to start again. Never too late to make a difference. It asserts that there are many, many things worth living for. And that's just so poignant. And does that speak to kind of what you've been through in your journey?
I think it does. Actually, I'd forgotten about that quote, and I wasn't expecting you to quote that one. But that is absolutely what I was feeling when I was writing that, and clearly relates to my own life. It relates to Veronica's story, which is completely different from mine. But obviously, my own feelings were coming through quite strongly when I wrote those words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So we have your first book was Ellie and the Harpmaker, correct? Was your first one?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And that was the one that I never knew would be published at all. So, I just wrote whatever I fancied, basically, without thinking about readers or anything. It's quite freeing, really.
Yeah. And that I know I had messaged you because I ended up finding that. So once I like find an author that I loved and I loved How the Penguins Saved Veronica, I'm like, oh, I got to go read another one of hers. And I found that one on the library shelves. I was like, oh, I found your book on the library shelves. And so I was able to pick that one up, which is always such a joy as a reader, right? It's like, oh, another gem.
Oh, yes. And in fact, Ellie and the Heartmaker is, I don't know if other people have read that, but it's completely different from How the Penguins Saved Veronica. It's a very different style of book. I suppose it's similar in that it's got very, very quirky characters, and it's written in the first person from the character's point of view. But my main character in that is a very handsome young man who's slightly on the spectrum. And then there's another main character who's Ellie, who's a woman who's following her dream, which is to play the harp, which obviously, again, slightly echoes my own life there.
Yeah.
But what happens to them doesn't echo my own life at all. But it's the most lyrical of my books, I think. And it's got a kind of mystery to it, but a kind of sensitivity and beauty that's really close to my heart. So I love that one too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what have you learned about yourself through writing?
Well, I've learned that I've kind of got hidden depths that I didn't know about because I assumed that, I was just quite a surfacey person. But when I start writing, maybe because I'm quite private and I don't express myself very much in speaking. That's got better since I started writing. But traditionally I've been a very shy person when I was at school. I was very shy. I always let other people take the lead and other people do the talking. So I think writing has brought me out of myself, helped me to express stuff that I didn't know was inside at all. It's helped me to form opinions that I didn't really know I had, even. Um, yeah, and I'm still experimenting with it, still thinking, my gosh, all that whole book came out of me. Um, Me, Hazel, how on earth did that happen? And yet, it must be in there somewhere. It's just all been deeply hidden before. So I think the writing has really helped me to bring stuff out and it's a self-realization thing.
Yeah. Well, what a beautiful way to find your voice there.
Thank
Let's
you.
switch gears a little bit and let's talk about who you are as a reader. So, do you enjoy reading these types of books that you write, or what's your go-to genres?
I do. I mean, I love other things as well. I mean, I really like crime so long as it's not too grisly and dark. I can't cope with grisly and dark because my imagination is just goes everywhere, and I can imagine it too much, and I feel too sorry for the characters. But I do like cozy crime because I like the sort of mental aspect of working out who did it.
Yeah.
Um, and I also really like historical fiction. So I love Philippa Gregory, and yeah, all sorts of different things. where you can kind of learn about the history, but in an entertaining way. So you've got a story running through, but you kind of feel like you're really learning a lot about that
Yeah.
time as well, that era. But I think mostly my go-to tends to be general character-driven book clubby fiction, um, and that's what I've chosen for my flight of books today. I've got three books
Wonderful.
that are quite book clubby, I would say.
Yeah, I cannot wait for you listeners here that are with us today to hear what books she brought. So let's jump into your book flight with this character-driven book club type read. So what's the first book you brought today?
So the first book, actually, I will just say this as well, that I was kind of looking on my bookshelves and trying to think, I would like to have something that's got animals in it or creatures, because my books always have an animal or a bird, as well as being mainly about the people, but there's always kind of that wildlife element of an animal or a bird. I was kind of looking to see if I could find something else that was similar.
Yeah.
But I didn't really do that because there's not many other books that seem to do that, even though I love, so many of the books I've read. But I did find three that are kind of vaguely related to animals or birds or creatures
Okay.
in some way. So the first one is The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd, which came out quite a long time ago, but it's an absolutely exquisitely written book, with great, great characters. It's got some dark elements. So it's about a young girl who is trying to escape from a very tyrannical father, who's quite abusive, very racist. This is all set a while back. It's set in, I think, look at my notes. Yes, set in 1964,
Mhm.
apparently, in South Carolina. But she ends up running away because of terrible things that have happened at home, but finding a new home in this eccentric trio of sisters, black sisters, who are all beekeepers. So it's got such an unusual premise, but it's kind of about the characters and it's about her development, and it's about her finding a new home. And it's got that real thing about um, female solidarity and support, which is just so beautifully expressed. And there's also lots of really interesting things about bees and beekeeping in it. So it's got loads and loads of different elements all knit together beautifully.
Yeah. So you're kind of learning a little bit, but I remember this book lingered with me long after I've read it too. It's like I can still think of that one as a good one and one to
Absolutely,
share.
yeah. I read it ages ago and I really want to read it again when time allows, because, it is one of those ones that does stay with you for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. And what's the next book you brought today?
So the next one, I'm sure you know it well, is The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. So
Yes.
the animal connection of this is, of course, the horses, because it's about a collection of horseback librarians, again, women. So again, it's sort of about the women's solidarity thing, and it's about books. And again, set a while back, so slightly historical, set in the 70s, I think this one was. But yes, the whole community thing, the mystery of the story, the strength of the characters, the whole premise of trekking with those horses and those books in the mountains, um just the setting was amazing, the whole way it's written. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I remember this one being a page turner. Like, oh, I want to know what's going to happen.
You do, don't you? And the relationships are so interesting in it as well, because she's married to this slightly odd man. You don't quite know what's going on in their relationship, and she's kind of in a different culture, and there's all these interesting interrelationships going on, and you think, what? How is this going to
Yeah.
end?
Okay, so that was The Giver of Stars by Jojo Moyes. And then what's the last book you brought today?
So the last one is called The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna Cannon. It's done really, really well in the UK. I don't know if you'll know it so well in the US. It might be published over there, but it might not. Who knows? But it is, again, actually, it was set in the 70s. It's a really quirky story, about two children growing up in this little community of this little village community, and there's a woman who's missing, and they try and work out what the mystery is, but it's a sort of coming of age story. There aren't actually any goats and sheep in it. That's just something that they kind of say, which I think is a quote from the Bible that they just use, but it's got so many quirky elements. And Joanna Cannon is a brilliant, brilliant writer. There's kind of a little dark thread through it, but it's also hilariously funny. And you really get into the shoes of these two little girls and their quirky ways of thinking as they're trying to solve this mystery of the missing woman in the neighborhood. It's
Oh,
great.
okay.
It's really great.
Yeah, it sounds fun. Okay, so The Trouble with Goats and Sheep by Joanna Cannon. Well, let's go ahead and let's dig into our book club part of this. So let's get into how the Penguins Save Veronica.
First, I would just like to say I very much enjoyed the book. And when I went in to start reading the book, I didn't read the book blurb. I saw penguins. I had it on my list, and I was attracted by the animal aspect as well. And then when I read it, it was different than my expectations, but in such the most wonderful way. And the story just unfolded beautifully, and how she interacted with the penguins. I got my fill of animals as well, so that was very nice. I wondered what kind of research that you had to conduct to write the book, like with the penguins and the northern aspect.
Yeah, really good question. I had so much research to do. In fact, there was really a lot. So my first thing was that I have a really good friend who is majorly obsessed with penguins. She's my kind of age, but she has traveled around lots and lots of countries taking photographs of penguins in their natural environment. And she was one of the people who put the idea of penguins into my head, because she wanted to do that specifically because she loves penguins so much, but she'd been through a difficult time in her own life. Her husband had died really, really suddenly. But she knew that penguins were a happy place for her, a happy thing that would cheer her up. So she kind of made this decision that she would take a photograph of every single species of penguin in their natural environment. She's been on loads and loads of trips around the place taking photographs of penguins. So she was my first port of call for research. So I quizzed her a lot about the different penguins she'd seen, and specifically about her trips to Antarctica. And of course, I spent ages looking at her wonderful photographs and discussing all that with her. Because I hadn't been to Antarctica myself at that point. I still haven't. I have seen penguins in the wild, but not there. Um, so then, of course, you've got the amazing resource that is the internet. So I did loads and loads of Googling of penguins and watching penguins on YouTube, which is really, really fun research. And found out a lot from books as well. But there's this specific website which is called the British Antarctic Survey, which is written by scientists who are studying the penguins in Antarctica. So obviously that was a really, really useful source of information for me. And it's got blogs written by the scientists who are counting these penguins, which told me a lot about their lives. And I also read a book which was written by somebody my friend knows who has studied penguins as his job, living in a tiny little community of scientists in Antarctica. So that was incredibly useful for research. But when I wrote the book myself, I had only seen penguins in a sea life centre in the south of England myself. So the whole setting thing was research and my imagination. So I invented the island of Lockett Island because I wasn't 100% sure I would get every detail. I did as much research as I could. Wasn't 100% sure I'd get every geographical detail right. So I invented that island. But for the penguins bit, I went to see these lovely penguins in this sea life centre in captivity. And I spoke to the staff there a lot. And they also told me about hand rearing an orphaned penguin, which obviously comes up in the book. So they informed me about that. And I met this, oh, you got a cat there, how lovely. I met this penguin who had been hand reared, who was a very, very friendly penguin called Yo-Yo. So I spent a lot of time observing him and talking to the staff about, penguin issues generally. So that was great. So all sorts of different things.
You couldn't have picked a cuter topic, right, to write about and research.
Yes, and as we say, the uplifting thing is right there with the penguins. So my friend Ursula gave me the idea of healing through penguins, and I thought, gosh, although the story of Veronica is completely unlike her story, it kind of put that little idea into my head that penguins are something that cheer us up. It's impossible to look at a penguin without smiling. They are just such great, great little characters. So I thought if I want to write an uplifting novel, about somebody who's been through hard things but is then cheered up and uplifted, penguins are the right medium through which to do it.
And I loved the tie-in of that of like thawing her heart, right? I mean, you go to this, you think this frigid, cold place, but it's her heart is thawing at the same time.
Absolutely, yes. And it's just saving this little penguin chick that does it for her, and that kind of links in with her own past, of course, but brings out the loving side that we haven't really seen much at the beginning of the book. So I always really worry that readers are going to read the first few chapters and think, oh, what a cold, horrible character, we don't like this, and not read any further. But I hope you will persist with her, because she's quite a funny character but very feisty. I hope you will persist with her and discover the layers, peel back and discover that she does actually have a really, really good heart. She's just had a tough life, but she needs to go to Antarctica to see the penguins and to live in this tiny, hard community of scientists, for that heart to be revealed to you.
Yeah. All right, Jackie, take it away.
First off, like I said, I loved your book. It was fabulous. It's brought me lots of joy. And I really enjoy your quirky characters. I'm a big fan of quirky characters. And you really did such a good job threading the difficult needle of irascible but likable. And it's not always done very well. Like you can make them too likable, or often I see the problem is too irascible, quite frankly. And then, like you said, people don't like. But with Veronica, I was so compelled with her. And there was a couple things early on that just really caught me. One, you had her forgetting Eileen's husband's name. Eileen, who's been working for her for years, and she doesn't remember it. And I'm like, okay, she's older, she's forgetting some things. But no, that was simply because she just didn't care. And there was this one line I loved. If it's one thing I can't abide in life, it's a door left open. And I'm like, wow, you said so much about her character in that one sentence. I mean, there were so many layers to it of needing order, of that her heart's not open to things. I mean, like it just, so I wanted to know, especially with that line, was that like, were you very carefully crafting and going over it and over it, or was it just like this throw off line that you just put that thing in and didn't realize how deep it was until like later, or maybe you haven't until now?
The door thing just came to me in one of those flashes of inspiration that writers just always want to happen, but don't often happen. But that one did. And as soon as I thought, it just came, I don't know where it came from. I wanted to give Veronica something quirky, and I just suddenly thought she really hates doors being left open. And it just came to me. I have no idea where from. And as soon as I thought of it, I thought, oh, yeah, because that says so much about her, because she is a closed person. I've got to have that, and mention it a few times so that people don't miss the point. And then obviously at the end, and she has a reason for that as well, which is to do with her past, because something happened when she left a door open once. That wouldn't have happened otherwise. But also, at the end of the story, she gets into the habit of leaving doors open because she has to, because this little penguin has to come in and out. And that also is, of course, immensely significant. So the first moment of that that inspiration just happened. I thought, oh yes, doors. But then I kind of thought that through and thought, how can I use that? And it worked for me. So I'm really, really glad that you picked up on that. Thank you.
And one of the things you were talking about earlier about um her interest, like penguins kind of become her hobby and her pure interest, and how it brings her so much joy and healing. And I don't think people realize how much that, especially when they're having a hard time, they need something else to think about, so they're not thinking about their own crap all the time. And I just feel like today's age, we don't really make room for hobbies and interests or value them properly. And people are like, oh, you should sell this thing or do that. Like we monetize it. Well, then it stops being an interest or a hobby. And we just need to have a place where we can focus on something else, find something that gives us joy. And that's, I loved with Veronica, is that she wholeheartedly goes into this. It brings her no money. In fact, she's spending tons of money on this hobby, but she is getting fulfillment from it. And I think, as a society, we kind of need to stop monetizing hobbies and be more like Veronica. Just go in on it.
Absolutely, that is such a good point. And I could not agree with you more. I think our society has grown very prescriptive, very shouldy. You should do this, you should do that. We're always telling ourselves the whole time, oh, I should be doing this, I should be improving myself in this way or that way, or I'm not good enough in this way, or I ought to be doing this. But yeah, just the joy of penguins, what we should be doing is enjoying life. Um, you're so right. And I think that's one thing that I kind of wish I was more like Veronica in that way, because she has kind of charged straight in there and focused on what she loves and just really gone for it in a way that I envy.
It's like sometime in the 80s, we lost leisure. Like somehow leisure became this bad thing, and it's not all right to have leisure time. And well, you're, like you said, you're not improving yourself. You're not doing, well, sometimes you can just do nothing and it's a lot of something.
Yes, just let go, just be, just, yeah, do the things that bring you joy. Life's too short not to. I really think that's important. And we lose sight of it all the time. It's terrible. Yeah, we need to grab that joy. Grab those penguins.
One of my initial like write-ups for the podcast, so like 2.5 years ago, was like to leisure well. Because I think that there's so much, like you had said, like we should be doing this. Our to-do list is a mile long. It's like, well, I can't sit down and read a book because I have to do 75 things before I can sit down and read a book. And that's just not true, right? It's like we need to learn to leisure well and really do things that we just enjoy, because I think our brains need that reset too. Like we can't be do all the time.
No, no, I don't know why we've become like this, because animals aren't like that at all. This is again, the thing that, you look at animals and I think we have so much to learn from them. The dog, when he lies in the sun, he doesn't think, oh, I shouldn't be lying in the sun now because, I've got to be doing this. It just says, I feel like lying in the sun, so I'm gonna lie in the sun. And I think that's cool. We should all take a leaf out of that book.
Yeah. I also loved the grandson at the beginning, because I was like giggling so hard at that part when he comes in and he's just kind of a hot mess, and then to like have Veronica, but like he's trying, right? So it doesn't make you immediately dislike him, like, oh, he's a schmuck, he's not doing anything, and he just is, growing pot on his windowsill and all these things. You might write that off, but the fact that he's like, well, I wanted to do this for Veronica and I want to try, and so you did that very well with his character too, of like the both facets, right? Of like, he doesn't have much going on, but he's also recognizing that maybe I could change and maybe I want this to be something. And you did a very nice job of showing both sides of his character too, I think.
Thank you. Yes, again, I worry about him, that people might not like him too much to start with, because he is such a mess. But, He does have that intention of making a cake for his grandmother when he's going to meet her, and that's where it all goes horribly wrong because he's got all these girlfriend problems and this, drug habit, and and he just cannot get a grip at all. And you kind of can see, hopefully you can see them both looking at each other and despairing of each other because they're so different. They just don't understand each other's lives at all.
Yeah, it seems like an impossible divide when he first comes in of like,
Absolutely.
how will they ever come into this moment of like, reconciling this? They're so on the opposite ends.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, they have never, they're estranged. They've never met before. She didn't
Yeah.
even know she had a grandson. So they've kind of got this shock element is thrown in there into the mix as well. So, yes. And they're both very extreme people as well. I think that runs in the blood that they're both kind of a little bit acting on whims and a bit kind of judging things straight away and extreme reacting in an extreme way to whatever happens.
Yeah. Did you have something you wanted to add, Jackie?
Yes. I actually thought Patrick and Veronica had a ton in common on their base selves because at the beginning, both of them are just unhappy. They're unhappy for different reasons. They express their unhappiness in different ways. But what both of them need is purpose. And they both end up having the same purpose. And that commonality brings them together. It gives them hope. It gives them, if somebody is really struggling with things, ask them, do you have a purpose? Like, what is your point? And I think a lot of people can identify with Patrick. I don't think he's like this rare thing that people aren't going to enjoy. He doesn't know. He wants purpose. He wants to do something, but he doesn't know what it is. And there are so many people who don't know how to make their lives better. They know they're stuck. They could be working and they're in this job they don't like, and they know they don't want to be where they're at. They just don't know how to go about it.
Yeah.
That's one of the hardest things is, finding the joy, especially because we get so busy. We talked about before, the doing. I remember being in my 40s and I left teaching and I'm like, okay, I can do what I want. And I'm like, what do I even want? I don't know. I haven't asked myself that question in like 15 years. I've just been doing. Like, I have forgotten who I am. And I struggled with that. Like, that was really hard for me to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be and try things out, knowing that maybe that's not me, but I'm going to try it and see if it works or not. And that experimentation, and I'm a perfectionist, so allowing myself to try new things and fail is frightening, totally frightening. And I'm still not great with it. I'm better. I'm not great with it.
Yeah.
What an interesting journey, my goodness. And can I ask what you're doing now? It was very brave of you to leave teaching. What are you doing now?
That was just the right time. I have a podcast and I write. I'm not
Hey!
published. I'm getting close to that point. I have one book I've written. I think I may want to tweak it again. It has gotten so many rejections. But you know what? I don't care.
They do.
Here's a question I had for you. I had one editor for my first book, and it was okay, but it was similar to your vein. It's more uplifting. It's got quirky characters, and they're going through an adult coming of age story. And the editor, she wrote, and that was not her genre. And there were a lot of things she helped me with and let me see because it was my first time doing that. But I also felt like I really need somebody who really breathes and understands my genre better. So how did you find your editors? What was your process with that?
Well, interestingly, I didn't have an editor until my first editor was actually my first agent. So I submitted my complete manuscript once I got it to agents, and then they submitted to publishers. So what they do is when you have your first book, they will try and edit it before they send it to the publisher, so it's in the best shape possible. But a little bit like you, I had quite a bad experience with that first round of edits because my agent for Ellie and the Heartmaker tried to force it into a genre where I didn't want it to go. So she tried to make it much more straight romance, about a woman trying to choose between two men, which wasn't what I felt was the point of the story. And we actually ended up falling out over it. And she ended up dumping me. And I was absolutely gutted, because it's incredibly hard just to get an agent, even that first step along the way. So I had to start all over again and get myself another agent. And you know, that after that happened, I cried and I cried, because I thought, my goodness, I have climbed this hurdle of getting myself a literary agent, and now I've lost her again. I have to start all over again. But it all worked out in the end, because the agent I then got was much better. I told him what had happened. He suggested edits, which was so much more in line with what I felt was right. And then he got me the publishing deal, the first publishing deal in this country, in the UK, and then the one in America as well. And the two editors were working together over edits. And what they suggested was much more what I wanted. So from then on, it all happened fine for me. But still, occasionally, I mean, I've had quite a few editors now, because I just get passed from pillar to post, because my publishers, they keep going on pregnancy leave. How selfish. But so I've had various different ones now who I just get passed to, you know, I have no choice in it. And some I sort of feel are better than others. And I don't always agree with everything they say. And I feel I'm in a position now where I can say, no, I don't feel this is quite right. Most of what they say I do agree with, but there's always going to be something that you're not quite happy with. But I do think it's really important, at the stage you're at, is to really consult deep inside yourself, and make sure it's your book. Make sure that you have said what you want to say, that you've not been shoved in a direction by somebody else who doesn't quite get it. So it's worth going to another editor, if you can find one who you think will understand better. It's worth paying out money to do that. Find a freelance person.
It was a bit frustrating. Like, there were all these changes, and so I kind of made them, and it was a lot in the beginning of the book. And some were good, some I thought were excellent. And then I'm trying to do and I don't know if I just didn't do what she was trying to tell me to do. I had a bunch of beta readers, and it was like every change I made, they didn't like it. And they were asking for what I had written in the first place.
Right. This is what happened with Early in the Heartmaker. I ended up going back to my original idea, having slightly destroyed it by trying to fit in with what my first agent wanted. I was then advised by my second agent, no, go with what your heart suggests. Go back to this original idea, because it was better. So that's what I did. It didn't end up being exactly the same, obviously, because my own thoughts had developed in that time as well, and I'd had other ideas and other feedback. So the editing process is long. People don't realize how long it is, how many different phases, how hard you work at those rewrites. But it is worth it in the end. Just keep consulting with yourself and with your heart. Listen to what everybody says, but you don't have to do what they say, as long as it feels right for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I always admire the perseverance you guys have as authors, and because I know it's not this is a many years process. This isn't just like, 6 months and we're done. It's many years. So I admire that. Holly, did you have a question? I saw you raise your hand a minute ago.
It was just a comment to piggyback on what was being said, but how you said that Patrick and Veronica started out as perhaps, we didn't like aspects of their personality, but I thought that was important so that we could see the change in their arc. And in your book, I can't quote where it happened for me, but I remember feeling their change in both of them. And I just kind of took a deep breath and went, oh, okay, like you're starting to change. Like it was very clear to me while I was reading it, and it just kind of gave me relief, and it was just like a nice deep breath. But I also love what you said about following your heart, because I too am in the same position as you, Jackie, and just sort of dabbling and finding my way and follow. I keep coming back to that line in my own headspace, like just follow your heart, and listen to what everybody has to say, because I'm learning, but trying to follow my heart. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah, it's really important that you do, I think, because you don't want to be imitating somebody else's book or trying to regurgitate somebody else's idea. It's your creation, it's your baby. It's really important to you. You don't want to put something out there that's not you. I mean, it does take courage. I think you were saying, Jackie, courage is really important. It's quite a scary process because it is like peeling back all these layers of yourself and exposing yourself and putting yourself out there for other people to see with warts and all. But I kind of think it's a really purifying thing as well. It's really good for you and it helps you realize all sorts of things. It's worth the struggle.
Yeah, and I think you brought that up earlier, Hazel, about finding your voice through writing. And I think I know that's not probably an easy, I don't write myself, but I imagine that's not an easy process, but just continuing to listen to your heart will help you find that voice within you.
Yeah, and you'll never feel that you're totally there as well. I mean, it's not like you're there's the goal and you arrive there. It's like you're just kind of working your way. You just keep working your way towards it all the time, really, with writing. I think with all creative things, you're never good enough. You're always just kind of getting better and working your way, and it's experimenting. But hopefully there'll be some gems in there that people will enjoy and that you'll enjoy. You enjoy the process. It's all about the journey.
I've kind of have this rule for myself in the last few years. If I'm scared but excited, then I have to do it because the scare, of course it's going to happen. Like you're making these leaps, you're growing, and change can be frightening, good and bad. And I'm like, but if I'm excited about it and I'm really nervous about it, then I should do it. I absolutely should throw in and just try it.
Yeah, I
Um,
almost think it's a good sign if you're scared because it means you care, doesn't it?
yes.
Yeah, you wouldn't be scared unless you cared about what happened. So, it shows that you're really invested in it.
Now, something I was curious about, because to me it seems like a massive challenge. The harp, you said you taught yourself to play it.
Yeah.
How does that even work? And how did you get started? Like, how do you one day like, okay, I'm gonna master this thing, or not? Well, like you're gonna do it. How did you even begin?
Well, that was a bit of a happy accident, really. So, first of all, I will explain that it's not the big classical harp that I play, the type that you see playing in orchestras. It's actually a Celtic harp. So, it's a slightly different instrument. It's a folk instrument. So, it's one that traditionally people have learnt more by ear rather than in a classical way with going through grades and with music and stuff. So I guess that was sort of encouraged me because I thought, well, people in the past, this is the oldest type of harp, through the generations, people have learnt it just through trial and error and experimenting and listening. And the listening is really important with folk music because it is passed on through ear rather than through written music. So that helped me. But I kind of came across this harp actually when I was a student and I discovered I became secretary of the Early Music Society of St Andrews University because nobody else wanted that role. It was a tiny little society, only about 5 of us in it. So I ended up being secretary. And as the secretary, I discovered that this society owned various bits of old instruments, and I discovered that it owned a really ancient Celtic harp because it's a Scottish university. And I discovered this harp and it was broken, it had various bits missing. I think the university had probably had it for about 20 years or something like that. And nobody had played it. And I thought, gosh, somebody should play this instrument. It's so beautiful. So I kidnapped it one summer holiday and got it mended at the university's expense and started to experiment with it. And I did have a few lessons then to start me off because I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't play any instrument at all before then. I'd sung in choirs a little bit, but had no real musical background. And so I had a few lessons just to start me off. And then I just sort of went my own way with it, kind of tried to practice the finger technique that they had taught me. And it's just like with the writing, trial and error. and practice over the years. As I said, for those years when I was ill, I really physically could do very little at all. I was in so much pain. So I had a lot of years then where I wasn't playing it. But then when I had this operation, had surgery, got better again, I finally sort of gave myself that talking to that if you want to play this instrument, you need to practice every day because instruments work that way. You can't just leave it for a month, which is what I've been doing even before I got ill, just play when you're in the mood and then leave it. You have to actually be disciplined about it and do some every day.
Okay, it's a two-parter. One, because you like cozy mysteries and animals. Have you read the Shady Hollow books
No, I
by
haven't.
Juno Black?
Tell me
Okay,
about
check out
them.
Juno Black's Shady Hollow books. You will love them. They are this warm, cozy hug with romance and anthropomorphic animals, and it's delicious.
Oh,
And the second and third book take place in the autumn, so like it's a great time to read them now.
perfect.
We've talked about them on the episode on an episode as well. An anthropomorphic book flight has been on. So with Sonia, who Jackie introduced me to, but don't quote me on the episode number because I can't remember.
So, what are some of your favorite cozy mysteries? And you can't say Agatha Christie because that's a given. Like, what are some of your favorite books?
Oh gosh. Well, there's a historical cozy mystery writer who's called C.J. Sanson, who wrote some mysteries about a solicitor who lived in the time of Henry VIII in this country, so quite a long time ago. And they and they're really good because you've got all the historical bit, but there's also crime drama. There's murders and stuff. Uh, they might get a bit grisly at times, but I skim those bits. um, because obviously being historical, there tends to be a few bloody bits. But no, that is really well written and really good characters, really good mysteries there. Obviously, I do love Agatha Christie, but I'm not allowed to say that. I'm just trying to think who else. Who else, crime-wise?
Have you
Uh,
read the Rhys Bowen Royal Spinus series?
no, I don't know that. No.
Oh, that's 30s, 1930s. And the heroine is like the granddaughter of the queen and like 34th in line for the throne or something like that. Ridiculous. And it's about her life and starting to solve crimes. And she's just, it's fun if you like the 20s period. Or sorry,
Oh, that's
30s.
good. That
Yeah,
sounds
that
really
sounds
good.
good.
Yeah, excellent.
Adding to my list. Well, I wanted to finish off here, Hazel. Yeah, Jackie laughs because my TBR is 600 books plus long. So,
Mine too, mine too.
but we can celebrate really quick. We have your newest book as part of Veronica will have come out. This episode will be out on Friday, so it came out yesterday. Can you tell us a little bit about Gone with the Penguins? Give us a little quick entice us to pick it up.
Oh gosh, yes. Well, there is a book in between those two. So
Yes. Yeah.
Veronica has a second a penguin adventure as well, which is called Call of the Penguins. So that's to do with a wildlife documentary program. So she has another adventure with that, and she befriends a young girl called Daisy, who is mentioned at the end of How the Penguins Saved Veronica. So in Gone with the Penguins, which is the third in the Penguin trilogy, which I'm now calling it, the third and last, she and her housekeeper Eileen and young Daisy all embark on a sponsored walk together of 100 miles, inspired by the long walk of the Emperor Penguins, not all in one go, over bits and in lots of different places, but trying to do 100 miles within a month. And the reason that they're doing this is to save the local sea life centre and the penguins who live there. So there's a sea life centre near Veronica in Scotland, which is endangered. So they go on this sponsored walk to try and save the penguins there. But they end up walking in all these different countries. So there's 4 different settings across the world. And obviously they meet rather a lot of penguins again. And Veronica has her own issue. Eileen has an issue too, Eileen, the lovely housekeeper, and little Daisy has an issue as well. So it's kind of cross-generational friendship between the the three of them embarking on this adventure together, but each with their own little individual emotional journey as well.
Oh, wonderful. I love that we're going to get more of the Eileen and Veronica relationship going there and see more of that.
Thank you. I do love Eileen. She's great. Thanks.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining us for the book club today. It was an absolute delight to have you on, and I appreciate all your time you've spent with us today.
Thank you so, so much for having me. It's been really lovely to meet you and to meet all of you. Thank you for your very interesting questions, and it's been a real joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us for the second edition of the BFF Book Club with Hazel Pryor on how the Penguins saved Veronica. If you'd like to join us for our next meeting, we will be reading Faking Christmas by Cindy Steele. It's a Christmas rom-com, and it's sure to have you laughing. You can join us for our meeting on December 8th at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Head on over to our website, bookishflights.com, and you can find the BFF Book Club at the top header. That's it for today. Thank you so much for listening. As Emma Thompson said, I think books are like people in the sense that they'll turn up in your life when you most need them. Cheers to you, dear readers. Until next time.